Now, trade unions fear that government's plan to restructure the ailing and indebted state-owned companies because they believe that it will lead to massive job losses. They are planning to take to the streets and strike. So joining me now to discuss the issue is Labour Federation Cosatu's Zingiswa Losi. She's the president. Also joining me for her reaction on the president's take on Eskom is, of course, a Business Times columnist, Joffe. Ladies, good morning. Welcome to the program. Now, let me start with you, Zingiswa. You have been quoted far and wide that in the Alliance Summit that you've agreed to discuss these matters and that you are yet to discuss the breakup of Eskom, that you weren't consulted on these matters. How important is it that you be consulted in terms of your demand of a reconfigured alliance? And why do you believe the breakup will necessarily lead to job losses?
Thank you very much, Karima, for having me on the show. It would be important for us to be consulted because, firstly, it will make us to understand where all of us want to take this country, how we want to save the entities. Secondly, it would have allowed us an opportunity to understand how many options were there other than the unbundling. Now we are being taken to the unbundling of Eskom without understanding what other options were there. Also, within the unbundling, what does it mean to unbundle Eskom? So from what it is, from where it used to be, and I'm happy that Hillary is here, from where it used to be, so it used to be a healthy state-owned entity. What happened? Have we made an analysis and a diagnosis of what led to for Eskom to be where it is now? Now, are we dealing with the issue that has led Eskom to be where it is, or we're trying to fix, on top and sugarcoating on other matters? Because if we are going to unbundle Eskom, so into 3 entities, what would it mean for the cost of electricity into that? Wouldn't be any job losses? That's the question that we're asking. Because had we been consulted, Karima, we would not be having these speculations that we're making. We're making them because ours is to ensure that what we preserve are jobs. Also, the poorest of the poor in this country, who is going to be at the bottom end of receiving electricity, buying it from municipalities.
They can't pick up the tab.
Yes, exactly. And thirdly, we hope that it does not mean that Eskom will be privatized now, seated at the hands of the private companies and taking away the responsibility of government to ensure that the economy is growing and Eskom is working. So those are the 3 things that we would want to be answered on this issue of unbundling. That is why Cosatu says at the level of the Federation that we are not disengaging. And we don't want to disengage, but we want to understand what does unbundling mean and what is the impact of it on the 3 issues that we are raising.
Peter, I know you want to come in here, but Hillary, you have held many caps. You are the present-day columnist of Business Times, but you were also once the spokesperson of Eskom, so you have a good understanding of the place. Firstly, will the unbundling lead to job losses on the scale that worries other unions, Cosatu, the Federation of South African Trade Unions, and others? And more importantly, will it necessarily lead to privatization?
Karima, I want to come at it almost another way round, which is that Eskom is in crisis, as the President said. It's in this debt trap where it can't even generate enough cash to pay the interest on its 440 billion rands of debt.
Yes.
Something has to be done to fix the financial disaster, and you're not going to get the buy-in of funders to fix the financial disaster, whatever it is they're going to do. And frankly, I found what the President said on that subject incomprehensible, but let's get back to that. You're not going to fix that unless there's some return in terms of we've got to permanently get Eskom's operations and its cost structure down to a level where they're not going to keep coming back with a begging bowl every second year or every few months, as they have been doing. So something's got to be done about what the President called the business model. I don't actually see how it's going to be done without some job losses, but jobs are not the only issue. I mean, the biggest cost is coal costs. It's coal costs, it's transport of coal. All of that is absolutely ballooned. It's just the inefficiencies in the whole system. So I think something is going to be done about the cost base because people can't afford the tariffs anymore. Does unbundling fix that? Well, again, there's one thing I certainly agree with Cosatu, and I don't know what the president meant by unbundling. It's not new, but it's been coming up since last year. They've talked about functional unbundling. I'm not convinced it means privatization, because the president said, let's not privatize strategic assets. Let me make a case for it and say you have an independent buyer of the power and an independent national grid which buys impartially from the Eskom power stations and the privately owned power stations, and in that way almost forces the Eskom power stations to be more competitive and more efficient. You could make that case, and it looks like that is some of the thinking. But first of all, we want to know what is the thinking and how is it going to work. And in the short term, this is a huge corporate restructuring. It's not, to my mind, going to yield any great efficiencies in the short term. This is a long process.
Peter?
Yeah, I was going to ask Zingiswa Losi. You know, you talk about needing to understand, but you were there. Your members were there in Eskom while it was going wrong, while it was employing more people and producing less electricity. And why did the unions not speak up then when Eskom was captured and say, hang on a second, something's gone wrong here. This is not right. I remember when Brian Molefe came back to Eskom for the second time, the place was full. Eskom headquarters was full of chanting, dancing employees welcoming him back. He was ruining the place. So why did you turn a blind eye to that?
Surely we did not turn a blind eye. You would have remembered that we've gone on strikes, we've gone on marches, we've handed memorandums, raising exactly the very same frustrations, that anything that's got to do with the problems at Eskom are not as a result of workers, the blue-collar workers. It is because of the politics. It is because of mismanagement or maladministration, lack of governance, proper governance issues. And those that are at the receiving end are workers. That is why NUM, NUMSA at Eskom did not keep quiet. Now, we can't...
But with respect, let me interrupt you. I interviewed the NUM spokesperson on this matter on my radio show on 702. And you know, he said two things that struck me. He said that President Jacob Zuma was the best president ever because there were no job losses at Eskom, and he refused to accept that they were actually complicit in the very point that Peter was making, which was, of course, state capture. Now, we have seen NUM members' names being mentioned at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, both in relation to the Guptas as well as Bosasa. In fact, I broke the story when NUM members came to me and said, Karima, our leadership wants to sell the workers' bank to the Guptas, expose the story. So how can you say that NUM shouldn't take part responsibility for the fact that Eskom is in fact bankrupt?
No, I'm not saying, Karima, that people should not take responsibility, but I'm talking on behalf of the organization. What individuals are doing, surely I cannot respond on that. For an example, the issues that you're raising, I'm not aware of them, and I'm not going to deny that those are issues that are there, but I'm going to speak, because when I speak on behalf of the general membership. So, I'm raising these issues because also ourselves at the level of the Federation, when we engage with the African National Congress at the level of the Alliance, these are issues that we're raising. We're concerned. We're raising the issues of coal. We're raising the issues of looking at alternatives of, for an example, as Hilary says, restructuring, as you say, may result to job losses. But would that mean that job losses at Eskom and allowing workers to go and stay at home? Or would it mean that reskilling them and let them go and produce electricity using the mix, the clean energy? So you can shift them. from here at Eskom and allow them to be part of the mixed energy. So they don't have to be retrenched and go and stay at home. So that's why we are saying, can we have a conversation, and a proper one, that says what does unbundling mean and what would it mean, because there would be a contradiction. If we were to say workers, because of course we all agree that we must save Eskom, we're going to retrench you and get you to stay at home, you get unemployed. With the rate of 38% of unemployment in this country, and what the president said in the State of the Nation of creating more jobs, the outcomes of the job summit, the investment summit, retrenching would also be in contradiction with those decisions. So we're saying, let us reskill, let us skill workers, let us put them into a different find different alternatives for them.
New technology.
New technology that is coming. And also, for an example, we're making this argument, Hilary, that China wants coal. Okay? South Africa wants to do away with coal. What is it that we can use coal for other than what we're currently using it for? Why are we not looking at finding new sectors, new industries, and reuse coal for a different, to generate something else? And those workers...
I can't think of one. What? No, but I'm serious. It's a serious question. Is that we've got 25 million years worth of coal in South Africa. What are we going to do with it? Hilary, you know
export
everything.
It to China and India. Some of
Can't we
it is
just
not,
export
a lot of the Eskom power stations actually work on different grades, but
Yes.
there is potential, I'm sure, to increase export.
Let's just take a listen quickly, chaps, to Zwelinzima Vavi, who represents SAFTU, and that, of course, includes NUMSA. And let's listen to his take on what the unbundling of Eskom potentially could mean for their members.
We're calling it a declaration of war. Unbundling of Eskom, in our view, is a start towards privatizing each of those components of Eskom and selling it over to the highest bidder. Already this government, if it was serious about a just transition, if it was serious about the need to consult communities and the labor movement, it would have done it already. Government have introduced and signed an agreement with 27 independent power producers behind the backs of the people of Mpumalanga, where we are told up to 5 power stations are going to have to be closed, and behind the backs of its own workers.
That's, of course, Zwelinzima Vavi. Now, Hilary, I spoke with Ted Blom recently, and he said the price of coal is exaggerated. The price that Eskom sells electricity to municipalities are exaggerated. Should we not break the hold of the coal companies? And a lot of people are arguing that there's some serious conflicts of interest on who owns coal. And it reminds me of the situation in Nigeria where they didn't want to solve the energy crisis because too many ministers were in the generating business. How do we deal with this coal industry and this supposedly inflated price that gets carried over to municipalities who often get their cash transfers from the Treasury because there's no tax base?
Karima, I'm never sure where Ted Blom gets his numbers from, to be absolutely frank. Look, one of the big shifts in coal is that it's shifted in the past decade or so from the large companies who used to feed it by conveyor into the mine to a lot of smaller coal junior companies. That has obviously in itself increased the transport cost because a lot of it has to be tracked, and in some ways has it did open the way for state capture in the coal industry.
I mean, Tegeta is that example.
Tegeta, exactly. So I think it's a big subject, the coal thing, but I really don't think it's as simple as people cooking the coal figures. The coal prices have soared, and it has to do with capture, and it has to do with inefficiency, and to be honest, it has to do with an effort to introduce more BEE into the industry. With this 51% black-owned requirement, which was frankly not government policy at the time, but let's not go there. So I think there's a whole issue with coal in itself, and I think you've got to ask some bold questions about, did we take the coal industry in the right way? So I think that is a subject all on its own, but that certainly needs review, and it's really not as simple as Mr. Blom likes to make out. I think it's overall that Eskom's cost base has become very bloated for a variety of reasons, and it really has to be tackled. Now, in the short term, they're offering this 9-point plan, which we haven't yet seen the details of, and which I can't believe you can do it without pain. And the president talked about pain, but he was a bit fudgy about who was going to take the pain.
Yes.
He fudged it, there was going to be pain, but we didn't want to affect taxpayers and we didn't want to affect consumers. And I'm just not sure. I think the whole thing was really important, what he was saying, in terms of both the restructuring the debt and the restructuring of Eskom, but what he was saying, I think, was a bit of...
Will you get some clues in the budget?
Yeah, on the debt side, definitely, but it's not up to Tito Mboweni, the finance minister, to talk about the operations. But on the debt, we're certainly hoping for clarity.
Okay, that's where we will leave it for the moment. I've been told also that this is a very delicate period, Peter, and nobody wants to really talk about it, and we should have some more light. So your question about the budget is a very prescient one. Still ahead on the program, we continue to bring you more reaction to President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address. Do stay tuned.